Hey y'all, welcome to Idea the Podcast series. This is a show wherein we discuss various social, cultural topics in relation to our school, Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts at ASU. I'm Chris Elliott, a student here at HIDA, pursuing my master's in musical theater.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a master's student of musicology in HIDA, and my research area is music and media culture.
And hi, my name is Jose Antonio Guevara. I am a freshman music education major, and my like instrument area here is trumpet.
And so, just a little bit of background information on IDEA. We are a student organization here at ASU that is dedicated to making the School of Music, Dance, and Theater a safe and equitable place for all students. IDEA does its work through five branches: DNA, which is the disability, neurodivergence, and accessibility; QI, which is the LGBTQIA plus inclusivity; Red Branch, which is race and ethnicity diversity; BE, body empowerment; and MWH, mental health and wellness. I'm part of the mental health and wellness branch as well as the Red Branch.
I'm part of the QI, Red Branches, as well as the Disability and Accessibility branches.
And I am in charge of the red branch.
Lit. All right, so
we have a spokesperson among us of the Red Branch.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
yeah.
All right, Chris, why are we here today?
But
Oh
yes,
my
so
God.
we're going to be talking about intersectionality. Um, it's the conceptions of it, its definition, and how it applies to the media and the arts. Specifically, looking at our school here at the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, and yeah. So just to kind of get started a little bit, a brief definition on intersectionality. Um, Intersectionality is a term used to describe how group identities such as race, class, gender, sexuality, income, and so on overlap and intersect in dynamic ways that shape and reshape an individual's experience. The term was first coined in 1998 by Kimberly William Crenshaw. Kimberly is a pioneering scholar and writer on civil rights, critical race theory, black feminist legal theory and race, racism and the law, and is a professor at both Columbia Law School and the UCLA. So that's
Yeah.
just a brief overview of intersectionality and how it originated here. So, um, why does it matter? Let's get into that first.
I think one of the really important things is how recent this term has been coined.
That's very true. That's
Right.
very true. I didn't realize. I keep thinking 1989 was a while ago, and it's not really.
Still, still like relevant. Like
Yeah, that
it,
was only like 6 years before I was
yeah.
born, so it's recent.
No, but it's I want how did we approach the issue of identity intersectionality before this was even like coined? Because it being
Hmm.
coined means that it was studied, it was developed. People came up with Kimberly Crenshaw came up with this definition. So prior to that, we might not have like realized the difference in identities and how drastic the difference can be, like not just race, it's also income or all these different
Yeah,
experiences.
I do know that in education, music education, and all that, there are diagrams and theories of like how, and this is also true for psychology, I guess, about how different realms of familiarity impact someone's growth as a person, mentally, emotionally,
Mhm.
all that. And there's like the immediate circle of like self, and then like kind of like the rings of an onion, then a larger group, which is like family and like immediate contacts, and then there's like school and
Did you
distant
say onion?
relatives. What?
Did you say like layers to an onion?
Yeah. What's wrong with that? I'm
No,
trying to make it an allegory.
I just think of Shrek when I hear that. I'm sorry.
It's a
Keep
great
going.
allegory.
Guys, let me finish, please. Okay, so yeah, and so then there's more and more extended layers when it gets to the neighborhood, country, so like social culture groups, communities, and that kind of thing. So I know that there's been models for that in like psychology and
Mm.
education. So it's not a foreign concept. It's just the idea of intersectionality of like things crossing the borders of all that.
Yeah.
is relatively a recent concept in
Yeah.
terms of like this term specifically.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's recent is because like I think, a lot of the way America is they like to ignore um non-white um issues, I guess we can say. You know, things that are in their realm of reality, I guess, because a lot of people are unaware of experiences of different people and are just refuse to like engage in being aware in their experiences and stuff. And so because of that, actually the reason why the term was brought up was it was in a lawsuit, or she was doing some sort of court, um, she was like a defendant or something for someone. And um, the reason why she came up with the term intersectionality was actually because she was saying that this person was being the woman that was being prosecuted or something was a black woman. And so Kimberly brought up that like she's black and she's also a woman, and brought in those two things, and that's how she kind of came to her definition and usage of the word intersectionality, because like those two determinants predicted and affected um that woman's ability in court, whether she was found guilty or not guilty. I don't really remember. I remember like reading this when I was looking up intersectionality, so I don't know all the specifics, but that's how it came out. And to to say all this, I say this because different identities matter. They affect the outcomes in your life, basically.
Yeah,
You
they
know.
shape who you are as a person and how you see the world, and because we're social beings, of course, and it also impacts how we are as musicians and artists. It's like, okay, what music were you exposed to when you were little, and that'll kind of shape how what music you listen to now or the stuff that you want to create. And not to mention that, like, whatever socioeconomic background you come from, ethnicity and gender all factor into your reception as both a person, a student, a faculty, or musician in this entire system that we're in right now at ASU,
Mhm.
not to mention
Yeah.
other schools.
And something I think that Chris, you're trying to like touch on that is reflected in just our learning environments is the way in which people act differently because of their background. So I'm assuming that in that court case that you brought up, Kimberly Crenshaw was arguing that her experience and background as a black woman affected her actions in whatever happened. So we see that a lot of people act differently, or they act in a certain way because they um, the way that they were raised or the different experience they have had have like helped shaped how they react to different things. I know that there is a an education book that I'm reading right now for my intro to music ed class, and there's a point brought up that a child who was raised to like not talk to their parents until spoken to, or like told to be respectful in that way, and a teacher who isn't seeing that they're participating because they're not talking and not being engaged, those two things can conflict even though the child was raised to be respectful, to not talk over people, and a teacher might think that this kid doesn't want to talk or he doesn't want to learn or something. So it's like we're seeing in all of our classes and societally with like issues where police officers and like minorities are clashing because police officers have a different expectation of the situation than minorities do. And a lot of times, if a black person has had family members or has had friends within their community who have been subject to police brutality, or has not even people you know, but just things you've heard of, you have that experience in your mind. And the same thing happens for every single like minority. And even then it can happen with like people who are of the same economic status. So
Mhm.
it's like it's very much your actions are determined by your past experiences.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, not only intersectional within just social circles in general, that also impacts our like students' lives and faculty careers in the music world as well. What you were touching on, Jose, about the like once like a child growing up being told to not speak till spoken to, and then how that impacts how a teacher interprets that. We get actually a very similar thing with a lot of music and art. I personally grew up with a really classical piano background. I'm a pianist. I was taught Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, the whole shebang, because that's what you do, because that's what we've been doing. So, but that ended up shaping how when I got to college for music, when I did my undergrad, um, I didn't realize that there's not just piano out there. There's like, what's a concerto? What I know there's things called orchestras. I just don't know how they work. And so that shaped how I ended up interacting with all this whole huge like deluge of new content about music and composers, not to mention when I was able to like uh, finally get some information on like BIPOC composers and women composers beyond just the old white dudes. Um, that was completely revolutionary. It was like galaxy brain moment for me because I had only ever consumed as a musician. I'd only ever performed the classics, and so there was more than just beyond the classics. And so it's actually what got me into my master's. Actually, I discovered this huge world of just so much music out there and how it all influences each other, and that's why I'm in my master's.
Like as we can see, like intersectionality doesn't just have like applications in like demographic type of things.
For
Like it's
sure.
about like education, as well, and like little
Student teacher relationships
it's
and
your
all that.
whole
Yeah.
experience and the makeups of that, and whether that is advantageous to you or disadvantageous disadvantage
Disadvantageous.
Disadvantages.
disadvantageous to you. Um,
English
No,
sucks. I'm sorry. It's so weird.
no,
it,
but basically relating that to the way our education system, just in general, our public education system,
mm,
a lot of times the backgrounds in which kids begin to learn about music are going to be different all across the country because funding is different
Oh
everywhere.
yeah, for sure.
Yes.
mm-hmm.
And
Oh my
that,
gosh, I could rant about that for days, but continue.
yeah, no, but that is an aspect of intersectionality within music because you have all these different kids trying to get into these programs and kids who want to pursue music, and everyone has a different background because of where they grew up, the ethnic makeup of their school, what kind of music they were um, exposed to, what were different opportunities they had to play. Some people have only played jazz, some people have never played jazz, some
Some
people have.
students like didn't get weren't able to afford lessons, and so their skills are more limited than they could have been.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so how do schools accommodate for that? You
Hmm.
know,
And it's if schools don't accommodate, then when we get to this next level, we need to have teachers who understand that every single student is coming from a different experience and we have to value their experiences. We have to value how they have learned, all the work that they've put in. That's something that I know my professors in my studio have like really touched on, is like valuing every person's experience and how they got to the point that they're at now, because that is intersectionality within music. It's our different experiences coming together and then working off of that instead of just having like a rule book and like some arbitrary guideline, because that won't fit for everyone.
Yeah, I
right?
know. I think this is an aside, but you mentioned, Jose, about teachers considering and respecting, but also gleaning from their students' experiences to be able to work with them and understand them more. I have heard quite, several teachers and like authority figures throughout my life say, "Well, if I did that in this like consider each of my students' experience and background, I'd be catering to the students, or I can't like change my class to accommodate everybody." And I think that's a common misconception when it comes to like intersectionality and and like putting in the work to be aware of your students and where they might be coming from or their experience. um I don't know, does anyone have any thoughts? That's a personal thought I just been having
Yeah,
about all of this, but
that's interesting that you said that. That's kind of like, I mean, like I think, I mean, coming from a teacher standpoint, I think that you should be catering towards each and every student, because it's not about your
mhm.
experience, it's about their experience, the people that you're teaching. So obviously, like, I think that I would say that you would have to, cater towards each person's individual experience in that class, and whether that means you have to put in the extra work, do some extra research knowledge around that. And I think that those applications go into a broader scale in regards to, like, you know I guess, in a classroom setting where, a teacher mispronounces your name, or misgenders you or mispronouns you, something like that. Like, I think it's being aware of those types of things as well. That, catering to each individual person's, you know,
Mhm.
um, their makeup, their
Yeah.
identity, because you don't want to invalidate them and invalidate their
Mhm.
Oh,
experience and
of course not.
their
Yeah.
space. You know.
Something really simple, like it's as simple as just asking the question, what do you think about this? Like, have you had experience with this? I think,
Yeah, asking questions
yeah, it's really simple
and
because,
listening.
I think people are afraid to be vulnerable. That's the thing.
yeah,
That's a very good
exactly.
point.
And
Yeah.
that they're afraid to, like, I think everyone's in a learning process right now. Everybody is learning new
You're
things.
learning for your whole life,
Yeah.
or you should be anyway.
Mhm.
Yes. You should be learning your whole life, and I feel like a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, I feel like America definitely likes to hold to its, like, old rooted ways, you know,
Yeah, and that's
um
just how tradition works. It's like if it's
tradition.
this, it's like,
It
oh, this is the way it's been, and this is why. If it ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah.
But
We're
that's just
also seeing like two very different ideologies within America, just about what tradition is, what tradition should be, and whether there's anything wrong with our predisposed, um, what already exists, like our entire, the way we function as a society. And
Mhm.
it's very much, I think this is occurring everywhere, and we're just seeing like a huge divide politically, and that goes into our social divide about whether tradition is good, whether tradition is not, and then that's reflected in our schools.
well,
So
not
it's
only COVID has been like making everyone have to reconsider. Well, I wanted to go back to normal. Well, what is normal?
mhm,
Is normal okay anymore? That kind of thing.
because we're so stuck in normal that we forget to realize what normal is.
Yeah, normal isn't the same for everybody. And I think that's another way that intersectionality is something that people, even if the word is a bit hard to chew on for some people, understanding that all these different facets of one's life impact um, everyone in all these different ways, especially as musicians and teachers or students. Um, Even if you're not technically, you don't really know what the word means, the understanding the concept I think is really important because that it goes into, like you were talking about, Chris, um, valuing other people's experience and what they bring to the table, and which is I personally think there's this common decency to just do that. But I know for a lot of people that's not something that they may be used to, because I definitely think, like you were saying, Jose, everything is changing. We're in a big, lots of divides on what traditions should be kept or what things are problematic, those kinds of stuff. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that people should just get more used to being exposed to new perspectives. And oh, you didn't grow up playing this thing? Oh, okay, well, what did you grow up playing? Or that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're
It's
not all
not
the
really,
same.
yeah, we're not catering to every single student where they would be walking all over you, or we're not
Mhm.
catering to what a teacher or whatever you're interacting with. We're not like letting people walk all over you by choosing to um, consider their experience and how you teach, how you perform, whatever. That's just,
Mm.
to quote the Christian idiom, treating your neighbor like yourself, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, it's one of the commandments, right? Isn't
It's
like
like the golden rule.
yeah, something like that.
It's the golden
Um,
rule.
so how can we see intersectionality be used and applied at ASU, specifically in Haida?
I mean, the name itself, Herbert Carter, just a school for design and the arts, and like the School of Music, Dance, and Theater. That's finally all getting connected again.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And also the introduction of, I know that we're having a Haida Day coming up soon, and
Hmm.
a lot of the talks and a lot of the presentations are about um, different activities of that people aren't used to. So it's like changing your perspective. I know that there's one that's talking about like knowing our past to know our present,
Hmm.
and it's like a history class that's, or a history lecture that's devoted to um, talking about these narratives that we don't usually talk about. And I think the more we change what we constantly change what we're learning, what new information is out there. We start just asking students, have you ever had this experience? What has been your experience with this? If you weren't experiencing this, then what did you experience in your childhood? It's just like really making it a curriculum that you can base and shape around students. That's the biggest thing, I believe.
And I think ASU has been making some progress in doing that. For example, like currently right now I'm taking course on the musical Hamilton and hip hop, and something like that would have not happened like 10 years ago. And also like next semester I'm taking a class about trans artists. You
I
know,
took that class.
and
I
yeah,
took
Maddie,
that
you took
class. It was
that,
great.
and like like that right there is progress. Um,
Not only
know,
that, it's specifically about understanding how different things intersect for the people, the subject of the class.
yes.
Yeah.
Like the trans composers and music artists class you were talking about, it's
Mhm.
specifically discussing how one's gender performance and sexuality and gender representation impacts someone's musical creativity and what musical choices they did. Like this, when did Carlos wanted to use or did a lot of synth work? One, she was a pioneer of synth, so that's cool. But two, she did that in a way to kind of represent herself as a trans woman. So classes like that are just even more important, especially now, because like I personally think Beethoven's a little irrelevant. His music's cool. I just think he's a little irrelevant because he's been dead for over
I
hundreds of
He's
years.
dead.
He's been
facts.
dead for over
He dead.
hundreds of
Yeah.
slutty years. Yes.
No, but it's also like this is possible because our faculty is changing.
Our
Representation
faculties
within our
Yeah, our
faculty.
faculty is changing. They're constantly getting new ones, and other ones are retiring.
Yeah. So it's like that's another thing. It's like faculty changes it because the only way you can have these two classes exist is having faculty who are passionate about these subjects, who see this as
Mm-hmm.
an important thing. And if we didn't have the faculty for it, we wouldn't have the classes for it. So like having faculty that is pioneering towards new ideas or just who are free to having these different perspectives highlighted is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if both a faculty and a student body that are both equally diverse is going to is going to have the most like you know results in regards to like experience and understanding and learning new things. Both as a teacher who's able to teach those things to these students who are able to see that hey, there are different avenues, there are different ways where I can intertwine my interests to do something. And we see that through these new classes that are offered. Students gain a new perspective on things and are able to and isn't that what we want? Like, why should everyone be doing the same thing? Why should we all be learning the same thing? Like, we're all in our own individuals,
Mhm.
and I think education needs to kind of like promote that individuality, and you
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
anything
And
you
that
want.
doesn't mean it needs to be like every like students going to take advantage of a teacher just because I'm coming up with this random excuse to get out of an assignment. That's not what that looks like. I think a lot of people misconstrue that the concept of intersectionality and considering other people's perspectives and, and considering how like the way you teach, the way you perform impacts other people will mean that you get taken advantage of because you don't have set standards. That doesn't mean you don't have set standards. Okay, you want your students to perform this amount of repertoire in their recitals? That's okay. Also consider that maybe they've never played those kinds of pieces before. That doesn't mean you don't have a standard. That means you need to reconsider your standards in regards to that student. Students using excuses to get out of work isn't the same as um, understanding that your student has a disabilities accommodation file and you need to switch how you do your exams to accommodate that. Those are not the same thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Again, jumping topics again and moving more towards like more of an individualistic approach. Like for example, me, how I would apply intersectionality to myself is, you know, I'm a black male. I am in college right now. I'm working. I'm able-bodied. These are different, you know, factors that represent and make me up, and they change constantly. You know, they change as I grow older. You know, and they were different when I was younger before too. And so, like for me, I'm not the same as another, you know, black individual. Like, yeah, we can share a lot of the same similarities and stuff like that, but like we're two different people, and I think a lot of people naively kind of just group people together, and they see them as the same, whereas like I I'm different from the other person, you know, like it's just like it's not the same, you know. And I think um, people really need to take into consideration that framework instead of like, you know, um, producing stereotypes about people, you
We're
know.
not only producing stereotypes, just internalizing. And in my experience of teaching or performing for this amount of time, all you young whippersnappers with that kind of thing, where you get stuck a pattern of behavior in your head, and so then that becomes a cookie cutter model you interpret every single person through. And that's important to acknowledge that, yeah, our brains will work off of patterns. We recognize those and we adjust our behavior to fit certain ways of behavior, and that's okay. That's just how our brains work. But we need to recognize that for when, as musicians, when we have to adjust our band count to include someone else, or who is not um, uh, who is maybe hard of hearing or some or visually impaired, or we have to adjust this class to include someone who is in a wheelchair, uses a wheelchair, that kind of thing. Um, Rather than letting yourself get used to working from a mold pattern, we're doing the same thing every single time. We need to adjust to be flexible. We need to be reflexive, if you will, to be constantly examining ourselves as well as others around us. And it doesn't have to be a like this grueling task that I think a lot of people think it is. It's just take a time to consider. Maybe count to 10, take a breath, and go, how would my students interpret this? Or how would my fellow, the rest of the cast in this production I'm doing interpret this? How would my professor or something like that? Just
Yeah.
taking a step back, deep breath, and think.
And also like being okay with making mistakes. One of the
Oh
biggest
yeah, oh yeah.
is it's so a lot of times we're afraid to do the wrong thing, that we just don't want to confront situations in which we may be uncomfortable or we may not be knowledgeable. And I know that the more we can just accept that we're not perfect and accept that we're trying to learn, that will always be better than trying to avoid situations.
Mm.
Like it's the the most effective thing for me.
I just want to say no one is perfect. That
No
whole
one is
idea
perfect.
of perfection, we're just on this whole continuum, this just up and down continuum.
Yeah.
That's all it is. This is blob.
You know,
The
and for literally for that reason, whenever like if I ever talk to somebody and they have like a different perspective on an issue that like I feel very strongly about, I don't come at them and I'm like, you're wrong, you're a horrible person, how dare you say this. It's not, because that's not
You're
constructive.
wrong.
Yeah, it's like, it's not, you can't, when we start attacking people from this sense, from this false sense of like superiority, it's like we're all learning, we all have different experiences. People have their perceptions of others because of their experience growing up, so we can't be attacking everybody.
And music
Yeah.
isn't like a mathematical equation or a chemical compound. You don't need to get a certain amount right to make sure you don't blow yourself up in a lab.
Mhm.
There's hardly any right or wrong answers in music.
Yeah, and also theater.
Or
Like,
dance. Well, I mean, there's probably right or wrongs in dance, so you don't like fall and break something. But
yeah,
that's an aside.
hmm just like in the arts,
There's
the
no
reason why the
right
arts
or wrong.
exist.
There's interpretive decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a parting message to end with is just kind of like take a step back, I think. Be more reactive and see, you know, uh, the people in your surroundings and, you know, look at your professors and where you are and see, you know, yeah, what am I benefiting from that others aren't? I think, you know, looking at, you know, your individual makeup, you know, the different things in your lives, your outcomes. I think that, like, you know, that's the approach that we should, you know, have. Um,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I agree with you.
yeah, that is all that we have for today. If you guys have a certain topic or that you guys want us to talk about, please don't hesitate to ask. You can reach out. You can reach out to us from our social media page at ASU Idea. I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, ASU Idea. Or reach out to one of us personally. Um, but we're so happy that you guys stay tuned and listen. And
Yeah. Let's
We'll
do
see you
little
next
like
time.
little little goodbyes.
tune in next week for a new topic. This is Chris signing off.
This is Jose blasting off.
Peace.